Hello and welcome to yet another session of In Dialogue Foundation's Certificate Course in Dialogue Studies 2024-2025. I am the Program Coordinator, Pragya Naran. We have the pleasure of having with us today Dr. Farhat Nasreen, who would be speaking on the topic Love, the Most Valuable Currency of Life. Professor Farhat Nasreen is the head of the department at the Department of History, Jamia Millia Islamia, and has a total of 27 plus years of teaching experience. She has taught military history to the cadets at the Indian Military Academy, Dehradun, before joining Jamia Millia Islamia. She is the author of 5 books and 18 articles. Her interests include medieval Indian history, medieval world, and modern world, politics, economics, society, culture, and gender. Dr. Nasreen, you have about you have up to 2 hours for the session. You may leave as much time for questions and discussions as you like. And as usual, I would like to remind all participants to keep their cameras on during the session. Ma'am, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Pragya. But the introduction that you've given is not an updated one. So I am not the head of the Department of History and Culture as of now. I've written some 7 books and published some 26 articles and delivered over 150 talks on various forums, including television and radio and so on and so forth. And my current areas of interest are the history of happiness and using history as a tool for building humanity. So that's it. So with this, let's begin with today's talk. So I'm going to speak for around 40 minutes, and then we have say some 20 minutes for discussion or maybe more of discussion, so that I get to know what are your feelings about this. So the first thing that I would like to say is love is a very, very difficult equation to solve because it's so complicated and it's got so many angles to it that it's really not easy to understand this particular thing. And what sets love actually pretty much apart from the other kinds of passing emotions that we have, because we have a lot of emotions. Our brains are working all the time, and there are so many things that we keep processing. So there are emotions that come and they go. So maybe you were angry at one point in time, you feel greedy at one point in time, envious another, and all of that keeps coming and going. But love is something that stays. It really hangs on into the mind, and then so that is one thing. So it has got a lot of, I would say, a lot of longevity. So it is not a passing emotion. And then the other thing is that it can also be, once it can develop. So once it develops for somebody or maybe something, some passion that you develop, then again it'll stay with you. So it's there. If it's real, if it's strong, it's going to actually stay. So that is that. The other interesting part about love is that there is a debate whether it is an emotion or it's also a physiological thing, because a lot of things that we love because they look beautiful. So there are things that we just love them because they're nice to look at, they're pleasant, they're pleasing. So that feels good. So that is not just about the connection of a soul to soul, which is unseen, but it's also about something that you visualize or you can visually see, and it's appealing. So therefore, there is always this thing. Then the other thing is that how societies and cultures, how have they perceived love at different points in time. So there will be a perception of how people understand love, how you convey love, what is the language of love. So the language of love might keep changing from time to time, place to place, and so on. So that is again something that makes it more, I would say, more complicated. Now, when there were studies which were done to see the physiological side of love, then in a particular experiment, it was found that when people saw somebody whom they loved, then there was a flow of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter which actually kind of creates the feeling of happiness. So the flow of dopamine increased, and it was as if, like, there were bulbs that had lit up in somebody's brain when they saw somebody whom they loved. Quite understandable, because you see, we travel really long distances to meet people whom we love. We really look forward to those meetings, and so much goes around love. So it's very understandable. Now, the thing is that can one think that there has to be a limit to love? Can love sometimes, because you would find that maybe uh, uh, you're in love with somebody, but there's no reciprocation, then a limit has to be set. And as far as neurotransmitters like dopamine are concerned, they're typically, they're typically a sign of something that you really like to have, and which has got such a potential to give you pleasure that you might just get addicted to it. So there is, this possibility of getting addicted to a thing if it releases dopamine. And of course, that is, and in the context of love, it might just be an oversimplification to say this, because you find that actually the addiction to things that make people feel good, the world, in fact, is bending more towards actual drugs, the opioids, the usage of maybe even contrabands, because they give a lot of pleasure. So therefore, one has to understand. But then there is one more thing, that we find that for every emotion, there's a counter emotion. So if you're saying that you're talking about anger, then there is also a counter emotion of calmness. So if you're talking about love, then there is also a counter emotion of hatred. If you're talking about greed, there is also a counter emotion of renunciation, of not being interested in anything at all. So when you get into a terrain, when you're dealing with the human mind, you basically into an area which is really difficult to grasp, and also extremely difficult to generalize, because every human being is so individualistic. You see, in our brain, our brains are full of stories. जितनी भी हम लोगों के ब्रेन के अंदर तहें हैं, in all of those there are so many stories, and all these stories are related to our own experiences of life. So those make our narratives, and those are the narratives that we relate to. Those are the narratives which are going to tell us what we should do in a given situation, because the lower part of the brain, where it meets the spine. So whenever there is something that happens, that is going to send a message to the middle part of the brain that something needs to be done. And then the application of what should be done will be perhaps coming from here. And then eventually the action will be taken while you're thinking from this side. So therefore, it's a process, but it happens so quickly that we don't even get to know that how this happens and how quickly it happens. So, but these stories which are stored inside our brain, they pretty much decide how we are going to perceive a situation and what we are going to do in a given situation. So when you think of in context of love, and in context of counter emotions, you might find that there might be a story which is there in your brain which tells you that you have to love a certain thing. Say, for example, the things that we inherit as an idea that we have to love, because we are culturally trained to love a certain thing. So we would always, or maybe if there's a certain kind of a food that you are used to from your childhood, and it's a very very celebrated kind of a food because maybe your mom used to cook it. So then that's something that you would usually love, right? And love for food is also a category. We'll come to that when we are talking about it. So then it's extremely complicated. It's a mixture of a lot of things. It can't be put into a single box, because you have endless boxes in which you can store types of loves, right? So then, having said that, there is this typical way of speaking when you say that someone has fallen in love. So you fall in love. So when you think of why fall in love, um, basically, when you really want something desperately, that thing kind of makes you weak, because there are so many people who are really tough in their maybe official capacities, but they are weak parents. They just can't say no to their children for anything at all, while they might be refusing the world for other kind of things. So that is just an example that I'm giving. So falling in love means that it makes you vulnerable, and it makes you softer. So maybe that is why. And like, I'll give you a quick example that there was once a mystic who was sitting on the floor, and he had both his legs spread out in front of him. So somebody came and he said that, well, the Badshah is coming, the Sultan is coming. So therefore, please, kind of, you have to pull your legs in, put your legs in, because the Sultan is coming. So he said that when I have not spread out my hands, then I can certainly spread out my feet, because I don't want anything from the Sultan. I'm not spreading out my hands, so I can spread out my feet. I just don't care whether he's coming or he is not coming. So he was not in love with the money, with the position, with the power that the Sultan had to offer. So he was free to do anything that he wanted to do. But once you are in love with a certain person, with a certain thing, you are actually on a path which will be different from a path if you are not in love. So if you are, say, for example, if you're not in love with money, perhaps you're going to make different kind of choices in life. Your life choices are going to be different. If you are in love with a certain person, then your life choices are going to be different. Maybe you would not like to live in another city. You would like to. There are people who don't want to leave their parents, so they would be making career choices, which will be like that. Or maybe they are too bothered about their children. There are so many people who don't work. They would just not. I mean, they just drop their jobs, and so many women particularly would do that, because they think that that is a sign of um, showing love to their children, for being it's about being there for them all the time. And thus there are so many compromises that people would make. So the uh, the variety of love that one can think of is the broad examples, because we can't go beyond the broad examples. So one of the earliest forms of love that a child learns about is the love that it receives from its caretakers, particularly the mother. Now, when you think of the love between a child and his mother or her mother, you would find, that there is a thing which is known as autobiographical memory. So, autobiographical memory, you might be familiar with. It is like this: that you remember what was your favorite food when you were a child, what was your favorite cloth, what did you speak first, and the little incidents from your childhood. This is what make an autobiographical memory. And usually, the more time that a child spends with his mother, and the more that the mother talks to the child, the more likely it is that he is going to have a strong biographical memory, and there'll be a lot of matter. So, like, you have a biography, a book, or a biography can be a short, thin book, or it can be a really thick and a detailed. So the more of interaction that a child has with people who love him, talk to him, spend more time, and so on. Typically, children, I mean, now when I'm speaking about this in 2024, it's even more relevant, because there are so many children who are just left with the gadgets to do whatever they want to do. So, and there's no one to actually talk to them. So that way, you would find that their autobiographical memories are going to be very little. So when there's a buildup of this autobiographical memory, and also the cultural narratives the cultural heroes, sometimes the religious heroes that children are taught about, they're trained to love all those figures and characters. There is also, the love for the nation, which is inculcated early. Therefore, that is why it is very important that also love for humanity and acceptance for everyone should also be conveyed to children very early on, because those are the things then they get etched together with the childhood memories. So they are going to be like a part of the deep unbreakable weaving of somebody's character. So that is why it becomes very, very. Then course, there's so many narratives of parental love which we find in the Indian culture. So you have the narrative about Shravan Kumar, who was carrying his parents for a pilgrimage on both his shoulders, both of them blind. So that is a very, very popular image that comes to one's mind. Then you have Nachiket, who was looking for Yama because his father had gifted him to death. So he was looking for death to take him away. That's another example. And there are so many other examples of, say, for example, Puru, who had given his youth to his father. So all those narratives are there. Then there is the idea where parents also love their children very, very deeply. If you see the Raj Tarangini of Kalhan, which is supposed to be one of the early books of organized history writing in India, it's the history of Kashmir, where you have a particular queen who was told that if her child is born at a certain hour, then that child is going to become a great emperor. So she was very keen that the child should have a great future as per the prediction. So she got herself hanged as in her feet up and her head down, so that the delivery doesn't happen till the appointed time. And then the delivery finally happens at the appointed time, and the child goes on to be a great ruler. So that is the kind of classic examples, narratives of love for an unborn child that one can find. And then, I mean, people would do so much if to save their save their children who are not even born yet. And as far when you think of the born children, the bonds are very, very deep in most of the cases. And why I would say in most of the cases, why we need to qualify this is because there are always exceptions to the rule. There are always exceptions to the rule, because there can be very complicated relationships between parents and children. That goes without saying. I mean, there's so many historical examples where you would find that there are literally children who got their their parents knocked off. So that it's an important area to think of. And you find that it's one of the earliest investments, that emotional investment that a child sees and learns to reciprocate. And let me tell you that people who are loved more are likely to love more. See, that is why there are many, many people who are unable to process the emotion of love at all. They are scared of being loved. Forget about loving someone else, but they are scared of being loved. They feel that they are being stifled. उनको जो है वो लगता है कि अगर somebody loves them too much or takes too much of care, then they don't feel so good about it, because they feel very restrained, because they are not used to something like that. Then there are also people who are not vocal. They are not people who would show affection. So then that is another category. And there are a lot of misunderstandings between parents and children, those who don't show their love either ways. So that is again something that we need to think of. Then, of course, there is this whole idea, speaking first of the parental love, then there is this classic thing about, souls being in love with divinity. And the ultimate end of a soul's journey is being united with its creator. So that is a typical narrative, a religious and more than religious, a universally spiritual kind of a narrative that you will find in so many places. And this narrative will manifest itself in different religions and different languages and I would say metaphors that that particular religion uses. So then if you think about mysticism, the Sufistic mysticism, in the Sufistic mysticism there is this idea of ishq. The word ishq actually, if you look at the Kashful Mehjoob, which is the first Persian treatise on Sufism which was written in India, it uses a word which is hub. Hub, when hub is amplified, it's muhabbat. So hub is muhabbat and muhabbat is ishq. So the word which is typically used in the Kashful Mehjoob is hub, which is muhabbat. And ishq is how we generally and popularly talk about it. So when you think of hub in the Kashful Mehjoob, hub is a very advanced stage of being in love with God, because being in love with God has a price of its own, because it'll be like a ladder. So you start off with a ladder, first of all is that you start forgiving people. That is how you start. So it's not about just saying that I love God. It's not like that. You have to climb all the steps of the ladder, then you finally reach a stage where you can say, wow, I love God and I believe that he loves me. It's not something that happens like snapping of a finger. So when it is so detailed that it says that, well, then you have to forgive people, and then it also lays a condition that if you're thinking that you are going to forgive, then forgive quickly, right? And you may or may not forget. That's another thing. But forgiveness it has to come from the heart. Otherwise, you will be like holding a burning piece of coal in your hand, burning yourself, if you keep that grudge and you carry that grudge. The other thing is asking for forgiveness. That's also a part of this muhabbat. And asking for forgiveness, it's stated that if you decide that mujhe sorry kehna hai, then it has to be quick. Because if you don't do it quickly, it's not going to happen. Because your brain is going to play some kind of a game with you. Like, most of us have got egos which are latent, but they might just, become like a raging beast at any point in time. So it's going to always tell us that, no, it's over now. Let's not talk about it. Why should I say sorry? It's already been, so long, so many days have passed. Everything is going fine. Sorry kehne ki koi zarurat nahi, but zarurat hai. And then the other thing that it says that if you don't do it quickly, then it's not happening. And when you say it, then you have to mean it. You can't, and when you mean it, then it means that you are not going to repeat the same thing again. And you have to be very sure about it. Otherwise, there's no point at all. So there are a number of things. Then there's another thing that this mohabbat will ask for, and that is fukr. That is, you don't have to be greedy, and you don't have to run after money. Now, running after money is again a very, very interesting and a very complicated stuff, because there are a lot of people who love people, but at the same time they love money also. So at times you have to just make a choice between people and money, because because you see, in life the most precious thing that we have is time. That is the most precious asset that we have, and that is one thing that we cannot buy at all. Time is something that you just cannot buy, not even a second. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the novel called The Alchemist. Paulo Coelho is very famous, right? So in this, you have this boy who, there's a boy who's traveling. Jiski ye puri story hai. And then you have a alchemist who's there with him, and both of them are caught by some dacoits of the desert. And the alchemist says that, well, we give you so many gold coins. Are you going to let us live for one day more? So the dacoit says, fine, okay, fine, we'll do that. And this boy says to the alchemist that, how did you give away all my money just for one day of life? So the alchemist says that I have struck a very good bargain, because one day of life is a big deal. You can't even buy 1 second of life. I've managed to bargain a whole day, and see how many things we can do in a day. And being a historian, I can tell you a lot of historical narratives where one day changed everything. So it's a big deal. So when you think of the choice between money and time, uh, time is something which is actually घड़ी तो आपको लगातार time दिखा रही है, मगर still we feel that we have a lot of it, which we don't. And we really don't know that how much of it we have, how much of it our loved ones have. We just don't know any of that. Lekin paisa is something which very tangible. So if you will, if you know you look at your passbook and you will know exactly where you are, exactly where you are. But with time, you never know, because when is your last minute, second, you just do not know. So that is the thing. But a lot of times people would just miss the point. So between this, this tussle between love for money, love for things, and love for time, and love for loving people, love for doing things for people, all those then start becoming conflicting areas of interest. Now, say supposing there's someone who loves money, you see, then the question is this, that what do you do with your money? What are you going to do with it? Because somebody may love money, and or maybe somebody may actually have a lot of money and spend it on helping people. That's one scenario. If you think of Sheikh Nizamuddin Aulia, the famous Chishti Sufi mystic of Delhi, he used to spend whatever futu that he got from the rulers, because he used to get money from the various sultans, and they would give him revenue free lands to manage the khanka and manage the langar which was happening and all of that. So every Friday he used to buy, from one Friday to the next Friday, he would not even have a penny left. He spent even the last penny that he had. And then there it so happened that there was sometime a sultan who decided to make a recovery. So he said that whatever futu and other stuff, this land free, tax free lands that we've given, whatever earnings have come from there, we want to do a recovery of that. So when they went to the mystics said that I have no money because we spent it. We never keep any money. So once we get it, it's just gone. So it's also this, that if you have money, where you put it? What are your other areas of love? So that is one question. Connected with this is the thought that people love to be, to be respected, to be impressive, to be able to make other people feel in awe of them. So all those are big temptations, because I don't know whether there's a particular book called The Psychology of Money, which says that there's a tiny, very tiny chapter in that about people who buy extremely expensive cars. And the author goes on to say that when you see a very, very expensive car cross by, do you see the person who's sitting inside it, or do you see the car? And then what are the emotions that the car generates? So perhaps you might just appreciate the beauty of the car. Perhaps you might feel envious and jealous of the owner of the car. But it's very unlikely that you are going to have this heartfelt emotion of respect for the owner of the car, because you don't know him. You didn't even see him. You would not see him. You would only see the car, right? And the people who buy some of these kind of things, and sometimes some of them don't have the money really to buy them. So there would be these cars, and they'll be bought on EMIs, and there'll be also defaulters of the EMI. But they feel that they are going to be loved if they have this. They're going to be respected if they have this. So in this context, I'll give you a quick example that Sheikh Sadi, this famous mystic, who's the author of these books called Gulistan Bustan, which are full of wisdom and knowledge. Once he was invited for a certain feast. So he went there in his very, very ordinary clothes. And when he went there, then people said that, well, you're not dressed up for this feast. You're looking like a misfit here. So he said, no problem. He went back, he came again, all dressed up in his fineries. And then he took out all the food which was being served there and he just poured it all over his clothes. And he said that you've invited my clothes. You didn't invite me. So you see, for him, he didn't value, good, fantastic clothes. For him, what was important was, who was he? Okay. And this question that who am I is a big question. Also, half of the people can't even answer that who they are and what they really want. So this terrain of understanding that, okay, fine, you can love money, and there are also grand mistakes. Like, say, for example, Guru Nanak Dev. Guru Nanak Ji, uh, he was not telling people to become paupers. He said that you do your businesses, you do your agriculture, you earn money, you serve people with that money, you live well, you live happily, you make others happy. That's good, So, but the thing is that where is this balance, right? So, therefore, when you're loving various kind of things, people, there are a lot of categories of love. So when you're loving various people, various type of things, then there has to be an allocation of um, your emotional giveaway, and also of your time. That becomes very important. Now, even within the mystics, so within the mystics, I was telling you, that there is this idea of the ishke hakiki and the ishke majazi. So the ishke hakiki is supposed to be the true love, which is the love of the soul for the God, and the ishke majazi, which is the worldly love, which is often used as a metaphor for people to understand the ishke hakiki. Now, uh, in a text which has the malfuzat. Malfuzat is the sayings of Moinuddin Chishti, who is the founder of the Chishti Silsila in India, and buried in Ajmer. He's got this famous dargah in Ajmer. So Moinuddin Chishti's Malfuzat, there is a certain Malfuzat, and he said that if you have Ishke Ilahi, which is, Ishke Ilahi is love for God, then you will have to say triple talaq. Three talaq, talaq, talaq. To whom? Not to your wife, not to your wife, not to your children, not to anyone else, but to yourself. So you have to say talaq, talaq, talaq to your desires, to your weaknesses, to your notoriety, greed, ego, anger. So you have to give this talaq, and only then you can find, um, the ishke ilahi. And when you think of the triple talaq, then there is a finality about it. I mean, it's very difficult to get married to the same person once once you're out of this wedlock. It's not easy to get married to the same person. So there is a seriousness about this, and there's almost a finality about this. So that is that. Then there are degrees of love. There are shades of love, and every soul will have its own way of connecting with divinity. So if you look at the bhakti movement, you'd find that there is the love of the gopis for Sri Krishna, And then within this Vaishnavite Krishnite setup, you have the Sakhis and the Manjaris who are who actually love Shri Radha, and they help Shri Radha in in kind of showing her devotion to Shri Krishna. But the gopis are themselves devotees of Shri Krishna directly. So the Sakhi Manjaris are devotees primarily of Shri Radha, and vis-a-vis that, they are devoted to Shri Krishna. So there are, layers. Then Shri Krishna himself is perceived differently by different sects in which he's worshipped. So there is this idea of Bal Krishna, in which he's a small child. Then there is this idea of Shri Krishna being a Gwal. So that is another form of his. Then you have Srinathji, that is another one. Then you have Shri Krishna as the Dwarkadhish, that is another form. Then you have him as the Giridhari, that's another form. When he lifts the Govardhan mountain, that is the Giridhari. And then you have the Murlidhar, which is when he plays the flute and he mesmerizes everybody. So there are within that, that one, I would say that one avatar, you have so many different angles of him, and you would have so many different ways in which devotees would try to show their love to him. So that what I wanted to basically convey was that it is so complicated, and there's so much of multiplicity in this, that it's really not easy to grasp and to capture in any small space, because love is such a grand phenomenon, it's such a big phenomenon, that's really difficult to contain. Now when you think of personal relationships, we know that there is a common gene pool that people have, and our genes are they basically, we are programmed to save our own genes, and as a species we are programmed to save our species. Because you see, if you look at the evolution, then there's always a competition between various kinds of species, and different kind of species will keep finding different ways of cooperating with each other and trying to safeguard themselves. So when you think of that, we are naturally attached to our relatives. That is, that the genes themselves will tell you. So you will have more than 50% with your parents, up to 50% with your siblings, 25% or so with your nieces, nephews, and so on. So that's a big deal. But the interesting thing is that we teach our children, we are told that there's a neighbor, or maybe there is even a neighborhood shopkeeper. So we say that ye uncle hai. You see, people will call them uncle, auntie, didi, bhaiya. That is all a part of our programming as a species, where we want to extend the bonds of affection which don't exist naturally, because naturally we are already related to our relatives, but we try to extend this relationship, and we make it very verbal, and we make it very loud and clear. Then there is also this idea of friendships, which is also a very celebrated kind of a love and affection, where you would find end number of narratives where the financial status of the friends doesn't matter, the religion of the friends doesn't matter, because we are in a very globalized kind of a space. So people are friendly with just anybody. And if you look at the trading ties between various countries had always been there, and they had functioned on the idea of reliance, trust, and respect, and so on and so forth. So all these things have always been there. It depends on how much we notice them, how much we nurture them, and what is the kind of importance that we would give to trust building. Because see, trust building is also in a way um, uh, another gesture which amplifies affection. Then when you think of the classic, I would say, ishke majazi narratives about love, then Laila Majnu is one of the big classics, because it, starting from Arabia, it's supposed to be an Arabian folk narrative. So from the 7th century onwards, it becomes increasingly popular. And the Arabs were always very fond of poetry writing. So you would have poems which were attributed to Majnu. And in the Kabila, or in the tribe of Majnu, there was this idea that when a man and a woman, if they were in love with each other, and if the relationship didn't work out into a marriage, then they would just part, and they would part very respectfully. So that those kind of ideas were already there. And when you look at this tragic tale of Majnu literally going mad, because his name was Qais, and Majnu means mad. So this is a classic tale where he goes absolutely crazy, and he goes and starts living with the wild animals in the jungle. So that narrative was first compiled in detail by a man called Nizami Ganjvi. And then, more importantly, in the Indian context, it was again, recompiled and rewritten in with an Indian flavor to it by Amir Khusro. And when Amir Khusro wrote the Laila Majnu story, he named it Majnu Laila, so that it could be differentiated from Nizami Ganjvi's story, which was known as Laila Majnu. And when you see, when you read Amir Khusro, so he would say that Majnu is, brooming the wilderness with the feathers of an owl in the shade of the feathers of an owl. Now, owl typically had a certain, certain connotation in the Indian context. Or maybe he gives another narrative when he says that Layla's family was almost ready to marry off their daughter to Majnu, but they saw that Majnu was being so affectionate to Layla's dog, and that dog was perhaps rabid. It was suffering from various kind of wounds. There was blood and pus coming out of the wounds of the dog, and Majnu lifted him in his lap. And it was there's a very vivid description in Amir Khusro that it was a hot summer afternoon, and there was loo all over the place, and everyone was hiding inside their houses. But the climate bhi itna change nahi hua tha when Amir Khusro was writing. And he says that this was this lone dog who was sitting on the road, and Majnu went there and lifted him up, and started patting him and said that, "Oh dog, you should be respected because you're so loyal. You never leave your master. Your love cannot be compared with any kind of love." When Layla's family got to know about this, they said that this guy is absolutely mad. Otherwise, no one would have touched that dog. It was so ill and it was so infected. So they said that we can't marry her to him. So, speaking of, love and madness, or, madness in love, again, you see, there is, I don't remember who has said this, but there's a quotation that if it's not mad, it's not love. So there is, this streak of frenzy where people would do just anything. And you'd find that this streak of frenzy, which also sometimes known as, divya unmad, which is something like enthusiasm, which you can't explain because it's you just don't know. You might just feel enthusiastic about something, or you may not. You don't know how that works, but it is there. So that is a thing. Then okay, then we find that there is also this idea of competing loves. So if you think of competing loves and in narratives, so if you're thinking of competing loves in popular narrative, it is the romantic love which occupies a lot of space. And there are a number of, especially two other major things which I would like to mention here. One is that a love for parents, which often takes a backseat. At least the I would say the vocality of people's love for their parents and the kind of care that they may need goes missing. Also, the love and affection and the acceptance and respect that one has to give to people at large and remain within the limits of humility, that narrative is also not spoken about as much as it should be and it could be. But it's a romantic love which is, all in all. And if you think in Agra, there is the Taj Mahal, of course, the incredible Taj Mahal. And you also have the Edmadud-Daula, which is a precursor of the Taj Mahal. And there are a lot of things which Taj Mahal was inspired. I mean, the design of Taj Mahal was inspired, the intricacies, like the beautiful, intricate arches and the Paitara Dura work, where you have multicolored stones, a building in white marble. All those things were there in the Edmadud-Daula, which is a building which was made by Noorjahan Begum for her parents. Her parents are buried there. But if you think that not only that Edmadud-Daula is nowhere close to Taj Mahal in beauty, even when you think of the narrative behind the Edmadud-Daula, most of the people would not even know about it. They might go to Agra, but not even, dash to Edmadud-Daula at all. So that is something that we need to think about. The other thing is that loving yourself. We are, so many times made to feel guilty about loving ourselves, fighting for being respected, for being given our due. We think that it is too much to ask for. There's a recent movie, 2024, which is actually produced by Jennifer Lopez, which has to do with her own life story, in which she says that she kept looking for love from other people. You see, so sometimes it's time to just stop looking for love. It's just time to stop looking for love and loving oneself for whoever you are. So that is what this movie was about. And in this, the picturization is such that she is roaming around after 4 broken relationships in a city in which there's literally nobody. So the picturization is such that it's a huge city. There are, tall skyscraper buildings, but she's just there all alone walking through the streets. And then there's a little girl who comes to her and says that you claim that you loved everybody, you always loved everyone, and yet everything failed, but you never loved me. And she says, but I don't know who are you? And this little kid says that I am you. I'm you. And then she that's a moment of reckoning. Then she realizes that she kept looking for love. She kept getting, she failed at that in whatever way, but she forgot about herself. So that is something that's important. And also, I would say not hating other people to an extent where you start burning yourself away is also a part of loving yourself. Sometimes you have to just forgive people and let go, not because you are doing them a favor, but because you are doing yourself a favor, because you're setting yourself free to move on and, do something better with yourself. So I think I have a lot more to say though, which I would just say 2 things. One is this, that see, there is this thing about assuming that people would know that you love them. Don't assume. They may not know. So you have to say, you have to tell them, you have to show them that you love them. That's important. And not only just show by gestures, say it. Because when you say, love you and I love you, when you say I love you to anyone, you put yourself out there. And I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about just anything. Maybe a parent saying that to their children, or to your parents, or to whoever you think that you have to say it, and you feel that way, then you have to actually say it, and don't assume that people will understand. And there are, of course, because we are human beings, we have our own limitations. So we can't be all loving. I think only God has the capacity to be really all loving. So then we have to kind of, have our boundaries. So we can't exceed boundaries of disliking something, you know. So beyond a point, one has to just maybe walk away. If you're if you really can't stand the sight of somebody, then just walk away. And as far as I would say loving things are concerned or people are concerned, let me just tell you that the most important things in life are not things. It's people all the way. It's people all the way. So invest in good relationships. Making other people happy is, I think, one of the best investments that one can make. Returns are ensured, because you see, अगर मैं अभी 10 लाख की एक साड़ी पहन लूं, ठीक है, और मैं पहन के एक पार्टी में चली जाऊं, मेरे पास कोई गारंटी नहीं है that people in that party are going to like my style. I don't know. I don't know. But if I go and treat everybody in that gathering with respect, with, empathy, and with a feeling of genuine affection, the likelihood is that I will get respect. I will get affection. It's a good investment. And it has to come from the heart, because you can't act all the time. It's very difficult to keep acting all the time. So with this, I think I'll stop and we can have a quick discussion with you, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nasreen. It was so nice. I loved all the examples you gave. But I think one of the things that kind of switched on the bulbs in my head was when you were talking about these love stories, these poetry, these epics from Leila Majnu to, we have the 5 love stories of Punjab, we have them from Italy, etc. and all. One thing I think which suddenly I am remembering is from my memory, that all these love stories, they had one thing in common: the women had agency. So for example, they go against the family. In Soni Maiwal, she's married, she goes against the rules, against what is considered proper, and she goes and meets her lover. And in for example, Mirza Sahiban, she runs away, and so I think when you contrast that with I think that is one thing, when you look back and you say that somebody wrote those things, means that there was and it was an aspirational thing for women to have that kind of agency. Of course, a lot of people say that it is symbolic of the worldly part and the divine love, which you call ishke hakiki. So a lot of people say it's metaphorical, but either ways, I think that is something which you don't see in any of the a modern written love stories, where the women have that kind of there was no damsel in distress in the eastern side of the fairy tales, of course, have their own, but west of the Greenwich Meridian line, you did not have sorry, east of Greenwich, you did not have that kind of damsel in distress. That was a little bit of contrast. So with that, I will just open the floor to questions. Purvi is already.
Love is very empowering, you see, because it drives you to do things that you may not have the capacity to do otherwise. You see, women can stay up the whole night looking after their newborn children. That's a classic example. How do they do it? And then they would never be angry with the kid. So, I mean, those kind of things, or maybe even men, they would earn so much and, dedicate all of that to their family or to people. I think it's absolutely amazing. It's a great driving force. बहुत शक्ति देता है. Yes, please. There's somebody who's raised his hand.
Yeah. Hi, ma'am. Thank you so much for an amazing session, and I'd really like to thank Pragya ji and Bezat ji for today's session, because she did tell me that today's session was going to be really interesting, and I did trust her. And thank you so much. This is perhaps one of the most important sessions of my life. I just have few comments. I don't have any questions because I loved your session, and I related to it on 100% level. So by profession, I'm a doctor and now into active politics in UP. And I've seen a lot of emotional turmoil in my life. And past few years actually I just sought refuge in love and gratitude. And they really made me a person who I am today. There was a time when I was very self-conscious when I was little. But yeah, like 10 years now, I am very, very, I understand what self-love is. And people have actually told me, "तुम्हें तो अपने आप से बहुत प्यार है," like, in a very selfish term. And then I've actually had to, make them sit down and understand what self-love is about. So first of all, I really want to quote you here when you said, "What is love? A difficult equation, a passing emotion, or a perpetual state of gratitude." For me, it's a perpetual state of gratitude. I found my solace with it. And when you were talking about different kinds of love, for me especially, I'm that person. If you're supposed to ask me, Purvi, how will you define yourself in 5 words or whatever, in 2 words, I'd say I am the most fun person. Humor is the biggest element of my life, and I'm filled with love. Like, I have so much love; it oozes out of me. And people I meet, people who are an important part of my life, I just mush them with love. So, especially my parents, my partner, my brother. Some days back, it is not funny because we were discussing and it was so relatable. Some days back, I wrote a 16-page letter to my parents telling them how much I love them. It's funny because while I was writing, I was having I was crying throughout, and my partner comes, walks into the room, he's like, "Why are you crying?" And then he's like, he looks at me writing big letters. He's like, "Are you writing Mummy Papa ko likh rahi ho kya?" He just understood because he understands my undying and love for them. And every day I make it a point that I call people I love and I tell them that I love you. Because as you said, you do not know about what happens. I worked during Corona. I was working in Delhi for second wave. And I realized that, patients came to me and they were like, कि पैसा होने के बावजूद हम अपने प्यार मतलब चाहतों को बचा नहीं पाए. We couldn't do anything. So I totally understood. And even, before that, my father, आदमियों में करुणा बहुत कम होती है, बट मेरे घर में मुझे करुणा मेरे पिता से मिली है. I have always seen them with, full of compassion and love and gratitude and kindness. And so is my mom. So I've actually, I am lucky and privileged कि मुझे वैसा घर मिला है कि मैंने जहाँ पे बहुत प्यार देखा है. And we are very vocal about, saying I love you to each other. Contrary to my in-law, in my in-laws, contrary to what I've seen here, I keep telling my partner, तुम अपने माँ बाप को बोलो that you love them. You tell them that you love them because he's that person who loves you, but he will not say it out loud. So I keep telling him, you tell people, and they all think that I am some kind of psycho. जो सबको बोलती रहती है. But I think love is not just a physical entity. Like you said, it's intangible. It's an emotion, and you have to feel it. And of course, the component of forgiving others, or the component of putting somebody else above you, the component of trusting that person, very important. And I totally relate. And there are 2 books I would like to recommend to this group. When you were talking about how dopamine is released when we love somebody, when we show emotions, it's not just only dopamine, it's serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, and adrenaline. So there's a book called High on Life. I will share that also on the group. It's High on Life. And there's this another book which talks about the power of gratitude and love in your life and how it changes your thought process, like how the mind gets hardwired when you love yourself. It's called How Your Mind Can Heal Your Body. There are so many, and there's also the book on emotional quotient. So I would share that with everybody, and I think everybody can go through it. It's a very nice, good read, not condensed at all. And the component of love in that, it's gigantic, enormous. You start to understand that, you also have to love it. So I also had a question, but you kind of spoke about it in the end. That is compromise a part of love? We are always told when we get married, especially girls, कि बेटा compromise करना है. I was very clear. I'm very adamant also. In certain, I love my agency. Autonomy and agency are also the words you can describe, So I was always like कि compromise नहीं, cooperate करेंगे. आधे में कोई मिलेगा, आधे में हम मिलेंगे. So, I don't think that one should really compromise when you love. You should cooperate. You should make, put efforts and also tell the other person that, see, I love you so much. I'm doing this. There are points I'm crossing just for you. I wouldn't have done otherwise. let the other person know you love them, you're doing it for them. And I truly believe उसमें कोई बुराई नहीं है. There's no harm in it. I just think that, love should be felt, should be seen, should be conveyed. And if you like me crazy, you can also write like 16 pages long letters to your partners, family members, siblings. I just wrote a very, very emotional message to my brother day before yesterday. How I loved him, how much I, I'm rooting up for him. And I think it only brings you close.
What is your specialization, Purvi?
Yeah. So, my specialization is in public health.
Okay.
I'm an MBBS along with public health. And I do give girls the talk on sexual menstrual health and also reproductive autonomy. And also this part where you are supposed to love yourself. Because so my area is a very rural area in UP, Lakhimpur Kheri. गांव देहात में क्या होता है ना, बच्चों को जिस तरह से ट्रेनिंग दी जाती है, बच्चों के सभी की ट्रेनिंग होती है, वो ये होती है कि आपको दूसरे के लिए करना है. So I tell them, you have to compartmentalize as well. You have to look at yourself. Altruism is one part, but also love.
Right.
I am very happy with your lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Purvi. I'm really happy to meet you. Really nice.
Same. Thank you.
Pleasure. There's someone. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, madam, for a wonderful session. I want to ask two things. One is, what are the similarities of the mystical love in various religion, various faiths? What will be the similarities of that mystical love? When does love turn into hate? When does love turn into hate? And third, is there a possibility that the human beings can wash to hate others?
Yeah.
Does it work? Because interiorly we are programmed for guarding our own species, protecting our own species.
Yeah.
And also it is love which will create those sort of acids or whatever you call it, dopamine and other things and all. But what does hate do? So what will be the thing? If you can enlighten us, it will be good, because in the we would like to know exactly what happens. Is the thing. I would like to know about the first one. What will be the similarities in mystical divine love and the various traditions, where we can get convergence? That's a thank you, madam.
I think a common point in all religions, as far as love for God is concerned, is that this feeling of gratitude, no matter what. So you may not have everything that you want, but nevertheless, you are happy and you are thankful. And even when you're in a lot of trouble and, maybe going through a lot of suffering, still believing that God loves you. So that is faith. So that, I think, is common to almost all the religions. Gratitude and an unquestioning love for God. Because, God's love may not come like in the form of a gift package of a stuff that you wanted or you had asked for. So you have to just keep believing that whatever you have is from Him, and it would be for a good reason. And there's a commonality there. There's also a commonality on being grateful. So that is there. That's absolutely unquestionable that this is a common thing. And also the ultimate goal of a soul is to find that place of solace with the divine. That's also common. There's no difference in this. Because everything that we think that we own, we don't really own. We don't own anything that we think that we, So what we really can look forward to, in our existence is the eventual meeting with the divine. So that is a thing. The other thing that you were talking about is how love changes into hatred. See, or how people might be programmed to hate. When people are programmed to hate, maybe they are being programmed to love something which compels them to hate something else. You see, because there will be a conflict of interest in the world. So maybe sometimes when you are being told to love somebody or something, you end up hating somebody else or something else. You can avoid this path only when you understand how the world works. You see? There is a book by a man called Yuval Noah Harari, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, right? So that gives you a fair idea about how the world, how politics work, how, socio-cultural pressures work, and how we need to understand those, those pulls and pushes and learn to dodge them and find our own path. That is the important thing. Because, hatred is another side of the same coin. People hate also very passionately. And there are two other books. One is Mark Manson, who's written The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And there's another one which is called The Rudest Book Ever, written by Shwetab Gangwar. Both these argue, you see, that if you invest your energies in revenge, then you're fighting a losing battle. You're sure to lose. Because the investment itself is in such a poor enterprise of taking revenge from somebody, making somebody feel sad. And the other flip side of revenge is this, that you don't know when you become the oppressor. Sometimes you think that you will oppress somebody just enough, just as much as he oppressed you. But you don't know the line. You might just cross the line and become the oppressor. So it is then in that case better to be the oppressed than the oppressor. It's very complicated.
Yeah, thank you, madam. I just want to sort of a compliment. I also ask you, does love for God actually in all the traditions sort of translate itself to become compassionate towards human beings? Is that part of constitutive love for God, or that is separate? Being a compassionate human beings and the love in action, love in deeds towards the human beings must be related towards love for God. Is that common in all the traditions or only in few traditions? Like
in all, you see, because it overlaps. Because if love for God is telling you to be humble, to be forgiving, you see, so you as a person, you would change because you will have to give up on all those things. So that automatically puts you in a place where you will be nice to people at large. You'll be generous because you're not attached to your own stuff. You know that someone needs your help, you'll give them your money, your time, or whatever else is
now does it make me an active agent towards a transformation in the world?
Absolutely.
Will it make me, or it both are different?
You see, religions have always helped administrators and governments because they without a court of law, there's no court of law involved, there is no constitution, there's no legality involved, but morality and ethics preached by religions have always helped to make the world a better place, and they will continue to do so. You see, religions are not going anywhere. So much of time has passed, so many things have come and gone, empires have come and gone, but religions have, they've passed the test of time. They're still there.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's someone.
Ranveer can go next, and then Jay. Thank you.
Hi, Professor Nasreen.
Hi.
Thank you very much for such a interesting talk. I would like to make just two major points. One, that I strongly believe that love and hate are not opposite to each other. Absence of love does not mean to hate somebody. You can be indifferent. It would be just absence of love, but definitely not hate. And this binary understanding of love and hate, it has to be challenged and contested and understood in this perspective also. My question is that personally, I think that society as an agency get threatened by love and affection. Though the whole talk was evolved that no, all different societies, culture, religion, it just they celebrate love. They always talk about love. It's all very loving societies. There was no conflict, nothing at all. But if you see around us, right now, expression of love in public sphere, is never celebrated. Somebody displaying affection in public spot is always get just a different kind of gaze, and sometimes even challenged, and sometimes even thrashed, right? Where the expression of hate, expression of violence, expression of some kind of abuse was just, people are doing it openly, nobody is challenging that thing. So how you see these two different things, which is totally just opposite to what we were discussing since past 1 hour. Yeah, thank you.
See, one thing which is very clear is, there is a textual side of religion, there's a scriptural side of religions, and there is a lived religiosity. There's a difference between them. So when we talk about, that what religions preach is one thing, and whether the followers of that religion follow it or they don't follow it, that is another story. That is a different story. Say, for example, even if you think of, say, Islam, the way Islam is practiced in different parts of the world, it will be quite different. Even though the Quran remains the only single book, yet the Muslims will be also different from each other. So that is the thing that, we would say that in the scriptural context, there is, of course, this whole narrative about, you see, love for God, and that means giving up on a lot of crap, cutting a lot of riffraff from your life. But the thing is that whether followers do it or they don't do it, that is another story. And how people perceive love, how do they understand how they have to show love, are also things which are changing with time. So it also depends from culture to culture, where what is acceptable. In some cultures, something is not acceptable. Then, of course, as far as, this hate is concerned, generally wars. I mean, wars have been there from ever since human beings have been there. There was this murder. The first murder is supposed to be the murder of Adam's son, who killed his brother. So if you look at the Semitic or the Abrahamic chain of religions, they believe that the first murder was when Adam's son killed his brother. So we have the beginning of, greed and enmity right from there. So it is always there. Let me just tell you quickly. There is a very ancient Mesopotamic story about a ruler called Gilgamesh, which is also very much like the Hindustani Amrit Manthan, where the devtas and the दैत्य दोनों ने मिलके समुद्र मंथन जो किया था, और मंथन में से वो अमृत ढूंढ रहे थे. अमृत के साथ में विष भी निकला, धन्वंतरी भी निकले, जो supposed to be the god of medicine. So Gilgamesh was a ruler in Mesopotamia, supposedly in ancient Mesopotamia. And then he decided to go and look for elixir, because he thought that if I find elixir, then I will have it, and I'll ensure that there is justice in the world and there is peace, and I'll be a good ruler. So he went looking for it. And incidentally, he also went inside a samundar. And the moment when he found elixir, there was also someone very, very evil who was looking for elixir. So both of them got elixir at the same time. And they had half of it. So half of it Gilgamesh had, the other half the evil fellow had. So दुनिया में ना अच्छाई मरेगी, ना बुराई मरेगी, कुछ भी नहीं मरेगी. When you look at Zoroastrianism, you find that there is this idea that both the demon and the angel, they're both inside you. The core war which is going on is inside your soul only. That is the core of the war. And every time you have to ensure that the angel in your heart wins. And if each one of us tries to make the angel in our heart win, eventually in the world there'll be a victory of angelic people and kindness and nobility. So that is how this goes. It has a lot of time frame constraints, cultural constraints. Generalization is very difficult on a theme like this. And it's very moving, it's changing very fast. Perceptions are changing very fast. Okay, and like you talking about the space in between, where you don't love anyone, you don't hate anyone, right? You don't know anyone, but sometimes you may just have an attitude which is an attitude of, not getting bothered by other people and not bothering them. You do your thing and I'll do my thing. जिसको हम लोग कहते हैं किताब है ये भी, I am okay, you are okay. Because there are three kind of people. Some people think that I am okay, but you are not okay. Some other people think that you are okay, but I am not. So the position that you have to take is I am okay, you are. तुम भी ठीक हो, हम भी ठीक हैं. We have very little time in this world, so let's just make the most. It's like that. So we have
Jay can go next.
Hello, good evening, ma'am.
Hi.
I am also a student of Jamia Millia, Islamia. I am currently doing my master's in conflict analysis and peace building in the Nelson Mandela Center. So my question is basically, I have like two questions. I'm not sure the second one, like the first one qualifies as the question or not, but it's more related to your background because as when you were introduced, the one thing that struck out to me the most was that you taught military history in Dehradun, right? And that's a subject that I like studying very much. That's one of my key areas of interest, military history. So I just wanted to ask you that how, like, what prompted this pivot? I mean, obviously you must have had an interest in this history of happiness and history of love, right, throughout your career. But how did this pivot actually like have happen in your life that you have now shifted from sort of military history to teaching about this and basically learning about this? That's my first question to you. And the second question is that I just would like to more into more of your insights into how like modern media, internet, social media has sort of warped our sense of love and affection in contemporary times. Because if I look at my generation, I'm barely 23 years old. I haven't seen much of the world, so I just wanted your sort of opinion on that.
Okay, thank you. You see, as far as leaving military history kind of things behind, I think I'm looking more at globalization now because everything is globalized. So trying to understand issues which cut across regions, so that is an important factor. And also, I think that there is so much of sadness around. You see, you don't find people smiling at each other easily. People get angry so quickly. So I think all those issues have also kind of, piqued this interest that where are we going? So that is why I'm looking at these two things, happiness and now love also. The other thing that you were talking about is, what was that you were talking about?
Basically your sort of opinion and sort of your mindset on.
Oh my God, there is a book which is called Dopamine Nation, Balance in the Age of Indulgence. This has been written by a psychiatrist of the Stanford University. Her name is Anna Lembeck. You see, the mobile phone is one of the most addictive things in today's day and time. Okay. And we keep judging our lives by a parameter of comparison, which is very distant. And there's another book that I was reading very, very recently. Yeah, this Psychology of Money. He also talks about the same thing, that when you look at a picture in the WhatsApp or the Insta, you see the best moment which has been captured and it's been put out there. So the moment you look at that, you feel कि यार इसकी जिंदगी जैसी भी है मेरी जिंदगी से तो अच्छी है, कम से कम मेरे जैसे बुरे हाल में तो ये आदमी नहीं है, ट्रैफिक जाम में तो नहीं खड़ा हुआ है. But you don't know कि वो कितनी ट्रैफिक से गुजर के वहां पहुंचा है, वो रास्ते में वो दोनों मियाँ बीवी लड़ते हुए गाड़ी में जा रहे थे, जब उसके बाद ये फोटो खींची है, आपको क्या पता है ना. So we really don't know. So it creates a lot of, I would say, false images. It's an industry. And if you think of the rise of the artificial intelligence, we have to use artificial intelligence intelligently. Otherwise we are going to really lose hell of a lot. Because there's so many things that we don't depend on talking to anyone about, but we would just look up. We just look up. Now the AI will tell you everything.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I just sort of follow up on this only. Basically, like I agree with you that Instagram and social media, we get this very romanticized image of but isn't that true for like throughout history also? Like nobody's sitting around in the medieval times. Even when you look at like poems by Rumi or other like very great poets that we study in history. I did my like undergraduation in history, so we had that section on literature, and people are sort of romanticizing this as well, right? No, people are documenting their best moments.
Can I come back? Can I come to you with this? You see, when you're thinking about written things, especially in the day and time of Rumi and Sadi and people like that, their readership was very, very little. Only the creme de la creme could read. No one else could read. When you look at the internet and the accessibility to the mobile phone and the world that it opens, even someone who's actually pulling a rickshaw is also looking on the mobile at the same time. You see, so this outreach is massive. It's nothing compared to the books. So they had a very limited access. And people who used to read those kind of books, they had a certain level of intelligence to process that. Now you've given this mobile and free data and lot of, this is one of the cheapest things that anyone can have.
Yes, yeah.
They don't know how to process it. There has to be a skill to process it.
Yeah. Like we have the sort of technology up there, but we don't have the emotional capacity to comprehend that.
You see, this is a industry because आप कोई चीज अगर सर्च करते हैं, ठीक है, मान लीजिए हमने एक कॉस्मेटिक कंपनी सर्च करी, तो नेक्स्ट टाइम हम कुछ भी इंटरनेट पे देख रहे होंगे उसके एड्स आने शुरू हो जाएंगे नीचे, है ना? So there's someone who's studying your pattern. Okay, so it's a multiply linked chain of commercialization. See, it's much bigger than we can ever imagine, and it's eating into our time. It's not letting us think independently. There is a thing about boredom. ये Anna Lembeck की जो किताब है ना, उसमें there is a chapter on why it is important to get bored. Okay, now we don't allow ourselves to get bored. We want to be entertained all the time.
Yeah.
See, so and there was Bertrand Russell was a Russian philosopher who was writing in the 1920s. He said that if you do brain work and work generally for more than 4 hours, then the likelihood of your inventing something great or being a great thinker, philosopher are getting zeroed. They're getting dimmer. You see?
Yeah.
तो 4 घंटे से ज्यादा अगर आप अपने दिमाग से काम ले रहे हैं तो आपका दिमाग फिर ज्यादा कोई काम कर पाएगा है नहीं, ठीक है? फोन पे तो लगातार दिमाग लगा हुआ है, लगातार लगा हुआ है.
And then ma'am, so like this has negatively affected our sort of perception of love as well. Now, would you agree with that? How we engage with love, how we engage with affection. So
I think the cinematic and the the media thing is they're selling an idea. They're selling the idea of it. And a particular kind of romanticization and a particular kind of physical beauty also, I would say. That's why you find that people find it so difficult to accept their bodies. You see, जब हम लोग अभी सेल्फ लव की बात कर रहे थे तो उसमें भी तो लोगों को अपने बॉडी से तो बड़े इश्यूज होते हैं ना, right? So that is because there you have a perfect body image out there. You don't know कि वो कितना मेकअप था, कैसी लाइटिंग थी, कैसा कैमरा था, आपको क्या, so ये तो है ही. इसमें तो that is why we have to we can't cut these things off because they are all advantageous as well. But वही है balance. I
like to use the word temperance basically this scenario, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Balance and okay. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Sorry, please go ahead, Sahid.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for a wonderful session.
Hi.
Hi. My name is Sahir from Kerala. Now I'm working in Hyderabad. Do you think, ma'am, religion taught us to love each and everyone, and each objects? And expectations in love comes where the love dies. Do you agree to this point? And one more request, ma'am. You are mentioning about Malfuzat Chishti. If you are having, and I couldn't find out that book. If I'm from a religious background and from Islamic studies background also, if you're having, it will be great where if you give that information in group. Thank you very much, ma'am. Please.
Okay, that I will share with Behzad ji. So he'll be able to, I think, put it up in your group. So the other thing that you were speaking about, expectation, well, one can always expect things from people you love. Why not?
Okay.
We expect so much from God also, don't we?
Yeah.
I think I expect the most from him. That's the best.
There was one query, ma'am. Do you think that because everyone is representing or everyone is practicing their own religion, do you think that the religion taught us to love everybody?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You see, the soul is pure. Let me tell you. The color of the soul is supposed to be white in most of the religions. White is a color of purity. Zara, if you have a little bit of dust, it's going to show. So that is how pure the souls are, and they're programmed to be pure. Because if you have the lie detector test, that is how the lie detector test works. Because if you start lying, your heartbeat is going to change. Your BP is going to rise because you are not programmed to lie. You're programmed to tell the truth only. You are trained to lie. We train ourselves to lie, to act. Because when we know that we have some work with such and such a person, we'll act very, very respectful, although we are really not like that.
And even in the Naqshbandi Sufism way of Sufism, there is also says about four tark. Tark dunya ko chhodne ke liye bol raha. Tark hasti, tark ukba, and tark everything. सब छोड़ने के लिए बोल रहा है. Do you think, ma'am, सब छोड़ने से एक आदमी को आदमी हो सकता है क्या?
Naqshbandis themselves were so involved in politics. Naqshbandi Sufis were involved in politics. They were the people who were, like writing 100 letters against Jahangir and Akbar because they found them to be they found Akbar to be too liberal. They were into politics. They were trying to influence the political flow of things in medieval India. There we come to this idea, that the scripture might be something else, but the lived practice is going to differ from person to person. So we can only play our part. We can't say that everybody who follows a certain religion will be of the same type. We have to do only our bit and walk away. That's it. We can't guarantee that our love is going to be reciprocated. No, we can't. We can't.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nasreen. It was a lovely session, and I have loved all your sessions in the past, and I keep looking forward to them each year.
Thank you, Pragya. Thank you so much. So kind of you. Yeah.
Thank you for having for being with us, and and we look forward. By the way, I would just like to tell the participants, Professor Nasreen has taken sessions in the past, and they're all available on our YouTube channel, and they're on different topics. And my suggestion would be that you go and see some of them, especially the one which was on medicine and the dialogue with medicine. That was one of my favorites. So thank you again for gracing us, Professor Nasreen.
Thank you.
Have
Best
a good night.
wishes. Best wishes to everybody out here. Bye-bye. Take care. Thank you.